The ceremony hall gleamed with crystal chandeliers, golden accents, and rows of perfectly aligned chairs, each bearing a satin ribbon tied just so. Guests murmured quietly, a buzz of anticipation in the air, yet none of it reached the bride. She stood at the edge of the aisle, her fingers trembling around the satin folds of her wedding gown. Today should have been the happiest day of her life, but something deep inside warned her that the perfect veneer of this celebration hid a storm she could not yet see. She took a breath and looked down at her hands. The engagement ring had been carefully chosen, sparkling with flawless clarity, yet it now felt like a cold weight on her finger. Or rather, it didn't fit. She tried to slide it onto her finger once more, hoping it was merely her nerves, but the metal resisted stubbornly. A small gasp escaped her lips, immediately noticed by the few attendants who were nearby. The thought raced through her mind. It's wrong. This ring, it was never mine. Her groom, a man whose wealth and status had once mesmerized her, stood at the altar with a proud smile, oblivious to the rising panic she felt. Behind him, a figure in the shadows watched silently, a billionaire whose presence had been quiet all evening, yet whose gaze seemed to pierce through the facade of the ceremony. Something in his eyes made her hesitate mid-step. It was almost as if he knew what she did not yet understand, that this wedding was never meant to be about love. She swallowed hard, her heart hammering against her ribcage, and tried to focus on the music, the delicate notes of the violin filling the hall. Yet every note seemed to echo with tension. Her mind wandered to the events that had led her here, the arrangement made under pressure, the carefully orchestrated courtships, and the subtle manipulations that had guided her to this moment. She had believed she was making a choice, but now she realized she might have been nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. As the bride's steps faltered, whispers began to ripple through the audience. Some assumed nerves, others curiosity, but all sensed a sudden tension that had settled over the room. And then, just as she reached the midpoint of the aisle, her eyes met the billionaire's once more. There was a question in his gaze, sharp yet sorrowful, as if he had been carrying a burden that only she could understand. It was a silent challenge, and her pulse quickened. The ceremony, meant to be a celebration of unity, became a battlefield of hidden truths. Every smile felt forced, every word rehearsed, every glance measured. The bride's mind raced, piecing together fragments of memories, whispered warnings, and the half-truths she had tried to ignore. This ring, this symbol of commitment, was not hers. It was a signal of a past she had not fully confronted, and perhaps of a future she had not chosen. At the altar, the groom extended his hand, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed her hesitation. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice smooth but tinged with concern. She wanted to answer, to say yes, to proceed with the day everyone had been expecting, yet she could not. Something inside her rebelled, a voice she had tried to silence, whispering urgently, "This isn't right." The billionaire, still standing in the shadows, finally took a step forward. His presence alone seemed to anchor the bride in the storm of her emotions. He did not speak yet, but his eyes communicated everything, warnings, regrets, and an unspoken truth that threatened to unravel the carefully constructed life she had been handed. The music swelled, and the bride's next step felt heavier than the last. Every heartbeat echoed the question that now defined her entire existence. Do I belong here, or am I stepping into a life that was never mine to claim? The guests, unaware of the silent battle unfolding in the aisle, continued to murmur politely. They noticed the hesitation, the brief faltering of her steps, and speculated quietly amongst themselves. But no one could know the truth, that in that split second, the bride's entire world had shifted, pivoting on the weight of a ring that refused to fit. The billionaire moved closer, his steps deliberate yet unobtrusive. He had watched her from the shadows for years, understanding secrets that others couldn't perceive. And tonight, as she stood frozen between duty and instinct, he felt the gravity of what had to happen. This moment was pivotal, not just for her, but for everyone whose lives had been quietly entangled in the web of wealth, power, and unspoken desires. The bride's mind raced as she considered her options. Retreating down the aisle would humiliate her, but moving forward felt like stepping into a life built on lies. And the ring, its stubborn refusal to slide onto her finger, was more than a physical barrier. It was a symbol of everything she had been denying, the truth she had tried to bury, and the consequences she had yet to face. The groom, sensing the tension but still unaware of the invisible forces at play, attempted to smile reassuringly. "It's okay," he whispered, but his words felt hollow. He had no idea that she had never truly belonged to this moment, never truly consented to the narrative he assumed was their story. The air between them thickened with unspoken truths, and the silence became almost unbearable. Suddenly, the billionaire's voice cut through the tension, low but commanding. "She can't do this," he said, addressing no one in particular, yet carrying a weight that silenced the room. Every head turned, but no one recognized the authority behind the words, everyone except the bride. Her heart leapt. This was the person who understood her, the one who had silently stood witness to a truth the world refused to see. The crowd stiffened, unsure how to react. The priest faltered for a moment, the Bible trembling slightly in his hands, while the groom's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion and anger. All eyes were now on the bride, but her gaze was fixed firmly on the man who had revealed himself as more than just a silent observer. He was a protector, a key to the truth that had been denied for far too long. Her fingers, still clutching the folds of her gown, shook violently. She realized at this moment, the very second she could have said "I do," was no longer about social expectation, nor about duty or convenience. It was about her life, and her choice. She drew in a deep, trembling breath, feeling the eyes of the billionaire anchor her courage. For the first time, she spoke, not to the groom, not to the priest, not to the crowd, but to the truth itself. Her voice, though shaky, carried an unyielding strength. "This ring, it was never mine to wear," she declared. The words reverberated through the hall, each syllable a hammer striking the fragile facade of perfection that had surrounded her life. Gasps echoed. Whispers escalated to murmurs, and the groom's face turned pale. But she did not waver. She looked to the billionaire, whose expression softened in quiet pride. Together, they had reached a moment of reckoning that would redefine their lives forever. The bride understood that this act of defiance was not rebellion. It was liberation. The music stopped, the crowd frozen in anticipation, as the bride finally took her next step, not down the aisle, but toward a life she could claim as her own. The groom opened his mouth to protest, but no words could undo the truth that had been spoken. And as she walked past the rows of shocked guests, hand in hand with the man who had always understood her, the weight of the ring, and everything it represented, fell away. This was not the end of their story. Far from it. It was the beginning of a journey marked by revelation, courage, and an unshakable bond that no wealth or status could ever replicate. As the bride walked past the rows of stunned guests, a whirlwind of emotions surged through her. Relief mixed with fear, and joy fought alongside guilt. The hall, once glittering with the promise of celebration, now felt cold and uncertain. Every whisper seemed magnified, every glance carried judgment. Yet, in the billionaire's steady gaze, she found a lifeline, a reassurance that she wasn't alone in facing the chaos that her declaration had unleashed. The groom, a figure of wealth and influence, froze near the altar. His expression was a mixture of disbelief, anger, and humiliation. For weeks, he had meticulously orchestrated this wedding to perfection, ensuring that every detail, flowers, seating arrangements, vows, was flawless. But perfection could not erase truth. The bride's courage had shattered the illusion, exposing secrets that had been carefully hidden. Memories of their past encounters flashed through her mind. She remembered the early days of their engagement, the extravagant dinners, the promises whispered in candlelight. At the time, she had believed in his affection, in the fairness of their arrangement, in the love he claimed to feel. But now, every gesture, every word, seemed tainted by ulterior motives. She realized that her intuition, which she had ignored for so long, had been warning her all along. The billionaire walked beside her, silently protective. He had observed the groom's manipulations from the beginning, understood the pressures exerted on the bride, and waited for the right moment to intervene. Tonight, that moment had arrived, and the truth had been revealed, not just to the guests, but to the world that had expected her to conform without question. She glanced back briefly. The groom's hand was clenched, his jaw tight, but even in his anger, there was a flicker of uncertainty. He had assumed control, believed that wealth and influence could dictate her choices. But now, confronted with the reality of her independence and the presence of someone who truly knew her, he realized that power alone could not command loyalty or love. The bride's heart raced as she reached the edge of the hall. Her mind was a torrent of thoughts, questions about her future, fears of judgment, and the lingering uncertainty of what the billionaire's intentions were. Yet, she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She could not return to a life dictated by someone else's will. This was her moment, her choice, her declaration of autonomy. The billionaire stopped and turned to face her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. His voice was calm, yet carried a weight of certainty that grounded her trembling heart. "Everything you feared, every secret you've been forced to ignore, it ends tonight. You are free to choose your life." The bride's eyes welled with tears, a mixture of relief and disbelief. She had lived under constraints, under expectations, and under a facade that demanded compliance. But in this man's presence, she felt an authenticity she had never experienced before. He didn't demand her compliance. He offered her understanding and support, the very foundation she needed to reclaim her life. Meanwhile, the guests were slowly beginning to process the unfolding drama. Murmurs became louder, some expressing sympathy, others astonishment. The priest, still clutching the trembling Bible, struggled to maintain composure. He had presided over countless ceremonies, but never one where the very essence of the union was questioned mid-aisle. It was unprecedented, and the tension was palpable. As the bride took a hesitant step forward, her gaze met the billionaire's once more. In that silent exchange, she saw a promise, not of wealth or grandeur, but of loyalty, honesty, and a shared understanding that transcended societal expectations. She realized that her heart, which had been cautious and guarded for so long, could finally breathe. The groom's voice broke through the silence, sharp and accusatory. "You can't do this. We've prepared for months. The guests, everyone is expecting." But his words fell flat. The bride shook her head, stepping closer to the billionaire, who now subtly placed a hand over hers. The gesture was grounding, a quiet reassurance that she was not alone. "I'm done pretending," she replied firmly, her voice echoing through the hall. "This wedding, this life, it isn't mine. I won't be trapped in someone else's story any longer." Gasps rippled through the audience. Some gasped in shock, others in admiration, and a few in disapproval. Yet the bride felt an unexpected surge of empowerment. For the first time, she was living truthfully, and the weight that had burdened her for years began to lift. As the night unfolded, whispers of intrigue and speculation filled the room, but the bride's focus remained on the billionaire. Together, they stepped away from the altar, moving through a path that no one else could walk with them. The guests watched, fascinated and conflicted, as a story they thought they understood transformed into something far more complex, emotional, and human. This was only the beginning. Shadows of the past would continue to haunt them, questions about loyalty and truth would surface, and challenges would test their newfound connection. But the bride now understood a fundamental truth. She was no longer a passive observer of her life. She had reclaimed agency, and with it, a sense of hope she had long feared lost. The hall, once brimming with anticipation and celebration, had fallen into an uneasy silence. The guests, still reeling from the bride's bold declaration, whispered anxiously among themselves. But amidst the chaos, A sense of anticipation lingered, a feeling that something monumental was about to unfold. The billionaire guided the bride to a secluded corner of the venue, away from prying eyes and murmuring guests. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low, measured, yet carrying the weight of secrets long held. "Everything that led you to this moment, it wasn't by chance. There are truths about your life, your family, and your past that you've been denied. It's time you knew them." Her heart pounded in her chest. For years, she had been navigating a maze of expectations and obligations, always sensing that parts of her life were hidden, obscured by forces she didn't understand. Now, standing in the quiet of the hall, she felt a mixture of fear and relief. The truth, however daunting, was finally within reach. He took a deep breath and began. "You were never meant to be here, in this wedding. The groom, he was never the person who truly knew you. Every step of this arrangement was orchestrated by others, people who wanted to control your future, your choices, and even your happiness. And there's more. Someone has been watching over you, ensuring that the truth could come to light at the right moment." The bride's eyes widened, tears brimming. "Who?" she whispered. He hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "I have cared for you, watched over you, and protected you when no one else could. I've known about the lies, the manipulations, and the secrets kept from you. And tonight, I ensured you had a choice, your choice. That is why you felt something was wrong, why the ring wouldn't fit. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of control that wasn't yours to bear." Her mind reeled. Everything she had believed about her life, her future, her choices that felt like a carefully constructed illusion unraveling. And yet, amidst the confusion and shock, a flicker of clarity emerged. For the first time, she saw the contours of her own power, the agency that had been quietly waiting for her to claim it. The billionaire reached out, gently taking her hand. "You are free," he said softly. "Free to define your life, free to make your own decisions, and free to step into a future that belongs to you, not to anyone else." The bride inhaled deeply, the weight of years of obligation and fear beginning to lift. The guests, still watching from a distance, could sense the gravity of the moment even without hearing the details. A transformation was taking place, not just of a wedding ceremony, but of a life being reclaimed from secrecy, manipulation, and expectation. The groom, meanwhile, stood frozen near the altar, unable to comprehend the shift that had occurred. Every plan, every calculation, every attempt to control her destiny had collapsed in an instant. His power, built on wealth and influence, could not withstand the truth, nor could it contain the force of a woman choosing herself. As the bride and the billionaire moved together, a sense of purpose grounded her. She realized that freedom was not just an abstract concept. It was a tangible, living force, demanding courage and integrity. She had faced the ultimate test of agency, and she had emerged stronger, more determined, and ready to embrace the complexities of life with honesty and strength. The night stretched ahead of them, filled with possibilities, revelations, and challenges. But the bride understood that this was only the beginning. By stepping away from the altar, by refusing to wear a ring that was never hers, she had reclaimed her story. And with the billionaire by her side, she would navigate the shadows of the past, confront the hidden truths, and forge a future that was authentically, irrevocably hers. The following morning brought a quiet, tense calm over the mansion, where the post-wedding drama had left its mark. Sunlight streamed through ornate windows, illuminating the remnants of last night's chaos, scattered flower petals, toppled chairs, and the faint scent of expensive perfume mixed with nervous anticipation. The bride sat near the grand fireplace, her hands folded, her mind racing. Every choice she had made, every truth revealed, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, demanding attention. The billionaire entered the room quietly, his presence grounding yet commanding. He sat opposite her, studying her with an intensity that was both reassuring and unsettling. "You've carried so much for so long," he said softly. Not everyone realizes how much strength it takes to stand here, to face what you faced yesterday. Her eyes met his. Vulnerability mingled with defiance. Strength isn't always visible, she whispered. Sometimes it's just surviving. And I've survived a lifetime of other people's expectations. But now I have to face the consequences of speaking the truth. The billionaire nodded. And that's exactly why you must be cautious. Not everyone will understand your choices. Some will resent you, some will judge, and some may try to manipulate the story for their own gain. But that doesn't mean you were wrong to act. Courage isn't measured by how quietly you suffer. It's measured by how boldly you live your truth. As they spoke, memories of the previous night resurfaced. The bride recalled the shocked faces, the whispers that felt like daggers, the tension that had gripped the room as she stepped away from the altar. It wasn't just a wedding disrupted. It was an entire world unraveling around her. And yet, the billionaire's presence reminded her that she was no longer alone in navigating the storm. Hours passed as they discussed strategy, not for revenge, but for clarity. They spoke about confronting the groom, about reclaiming her narrative, and about ensuring that the lies that had been spun around her would not define her future. It was a delicate balance, assertiveness without cruelty, transparency without chaos. And through it all, the billionaire remained a steady anchor, offering insight, guidance, and an unwavering belief in her capacity to overcome. The first confrontation came sooner than expected. The groom arrived, flanked by his closest confidants, their expressions rigid with indignation. He attempted to regain composure, trying to mask the storm beneath with rehearsed politeness. "We need to discuss this," he began, his tone sharp yet controlled. "This situation, your actions, have embarrassed everyone involved. Surely, we can find a solution without further chaos." The bride's gaze was unwavering. "There is no solution that requires me to pretend," she said firmly. "The truth has been revealed. You may try to control perception, but you cannot control reality. I will not return to a life dictated by someone else's design." The groom's frustration grew, evident in the tightening of his jaw and the flicker of anger in his eyes. But the billionaire remained calm, stepping slightly forward. "She is speaking for herself," he said, voice steady and authoritative. "And it's high time someone listened. No one should be forced into decisions that compromise their integrity, not even by those who believe they hold power." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Allies and onlookers glanced at each other, unsure how to respond. The balance of influence had shifted, and the weight of truth now rested firmly with the bride and the man who had defended her. The groom, despite his wealth and carefully constructed plans, was forced to reckon with a reality he could not manipulate. The confrontation, though tense, concluded without violence, but the bride knew that this was merely the beginning of a larger journey. She had reclaimed her agency, yes, but the emotional fallout, the societal expectations, and the lingering shadows of past manipulations would continue to test her resolve. And through it all, the billionaire would remain her ally, guiding her not with domination, but with partnership and understanding. Even as the confrontation ended, the mansion felt charged with possibility. Secrets that had long been buried were surfacing, and every revelation demanded a response. The bride realized that life would no longer be predictable or confined. She would have to navigate challenges, face scrutiny, and rebuild her narrative from the ground up. Yet, for the first time in years, she felt a sense of empowerment, an understanding that her story belonged to her, and she had the courage to write it anew. Days later, a new tension emerged, one that threatened to destabilize everything the bride had fought to reclaim. A mysterious letter arrived, sealed with an unfamiliar insignia, its contents hinting at a deeper conspiracy tied to her family and past. The billionaire opened it carefully, his expression tightening as he read aloud. "Certain truths have been hidden for decades. If ignored, the consequences will be catastrophic. The bride must choose wisely, or the cost will be irreparable." The bride felt a chill run down her spine. This was no ordinary threat. It was a calculated move, designed to test her courage and manipulate her choices. Yet, amidst the fear, a spark of determination ignited. She had faced public humiliation, personal betrayal, and societal pressure. Now, she would confront hidden dangers that threatened to control her life from the shadows. Together, they analyzed the letter, piecing together fragments of information. The billionaire's experience in navigating high-stakes scenarios became invaluable. He identified potential sources, motives, and patterns, creating a strategic approach to uncovering the truth. The bride, though initially overwhelmed, quickly adapted, her mind sharpening with focus as she realized that survival and justice required intellect, courage, and precision. Their investigation led them to long-forgotten archives, hidden documents, and conversations with people who had once been silent witnesses to her family's secrets. Each revelation was more startling than the last, painting a picture of deception, manipulation, and untold sacrifice. And yet, the bride remained steadfast. She refused to be intimidated, to retreat, or to relinquish control. Meanwhile, the groom, sensing the shifting tides of influence, attempted to assert his authority. But his efforts were increasingly futile. The bride's growing awareness, coupled with the billionaire's strategic support, rendered his schemes ineffective. Every attempt to manipulate or coerce was countered with clarity, insight, and resilience. The power dynamics had irrevocably shifted, and he was forced to reckon with his diminished control. The investigation also brought moments of vulnerability. The bride confronted painful truths about her past, relationships fractured by secrecy, moments of innocence stolen by manipulation, and sacrifices she had made without recognition. The billionaire remained by her side, providing not just support but understanding, empathy, and a steady hand in moments of emotional turbulence. By the end of the week, the bride had pieced together a clearer picture of the conspiracy surrounding her life. She understood the stakes, the players, and the potential consequences of inaction. And yet, she also recognized a profound truth. The power to determine her destiny lay firmly in her hands. She had survived public exposure, private betrayal, and the weight of expectation. Now she would face the ultimate challenge, one that demanded courage, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. As night fell, they prepared for the next stage of their journey. The mansion, once a backdrop for celebration, now became a command center for strategy, research, and planning. Every decision carried weight, every action could trigger consequences, and every revelation moved them closer to confronting the hidden forces shaping the bride's life. Amidst the tension and danger, a bond deepened between them, one forged not by circumstance, but by shared purpose and mutual respect. The billionaire's unwavering support, coupled with the bride's courage and intelligence, created a partnership capable of confronting challenges that had long seemed insurmountable. Together, they were no longer just navigating personal drama. They were rewriting the narrative itself, transforming vulnerability into power, secrecy into transparency, and fear into courage. The days following their investigation grew increasingly tense. The mansion, once filled with wedding laughter, now hummed with quiet urgency. Every phone call, every email, every small noise seemed to carry weight. The bride, once hesitant and unsure, had transformed into a force of calculated determination, while the billionaire stood by her side, a silent sentinel ready to navigate any storm. It was during a late evening, with rain tapping against the ornate windows, that an unexpected visitor arrived. A woman, older than the bride but radiating authority and calm, stepped out of a sleek black car. She introduced herself as Victoria, a former business partner of the billionaire with knowledge that could unravel the conspiracy threatening the bride's life. Her presence carried both mystery and reassurance. "I've followed the threads you've uncovered," Victoria said, her eyes locking with the bride's. "Some truths have been buried for decades, hidden by those who feared the consequences of exposure. But you've reached a tipping point. With the right strategy, you can confront these forces and reclaim your life entirely." The billionaire nodded, acknowledging her expertise. "We've uncovered much already," he said. "But her story isn't complete until all the hidden players are exposed. That's why your insight is invaluable." Victoria's involvement marked a turning point. Together, the trio began mapping connections, identifying who was still manipulating events, and uncovering a web of secrets that had ensnared the bride since childhood. The magnitude of the revelations was staggering. Long-buried documents, forged contracts, and false testimonies emerged, painting a portrait of betrayal and control that extended far beyond the wedding drama. Yet, amidst the chaos, there were moments of tenderness. The bride and the billionaire shared quiet conversations by the fireplace, exchanging small smiles and reassurances. She began to realize that their connection was no longer just about strategy. It was about trust, understanding, and the comfort of knowing that someone truly had her back. These moments, brief but profound, fueled her resilience as she faced threats that were both public and private. Tensions escalated when the groom attempted a covert maneuver to regain control. He enlisted allies, tried to manipulate witnesses, and spread misinformation, hoping to sway the narrative in his favor. But each move was countered with precision. Victoria's intelligence, the billionaire's influence, and the bride's insight created an unbreakable alliance. The groom's desperation became palpable, his frustration intensifying with every failed attempt. One evening, while reviewing documents in the mansion's study, the bride discovered a letter that chilled her to the bone. It wasn't a threat. It was a confession from someone within her own family, admitting to complicity in the past deceptions. The letter detailed financial manipulations, hidden agreements, and deliberate interventions that had shaped her life. She felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and disbelief, but also a renewed determination to claim her story. The billionaire observed her quietly. "These revelations are painful," he said softly, "but they are also a testament to your resilience. Few people could navigate such deception with the grace and intelligence you have displayed. You are not just surviving. You are rewriting the narrative that others tried to control." With Victoria's help, they formulated a plan. Public exposure was inevitable, but it had to be precise, strategic, and unassailable. They identified media outlets, legal channels, and trusted allies who could amplify the truth without compromising the bride's safety. Every step was calculated to ensure maximum impact, credibility, and protection. The climax of this part of their journey came when a clandestine meeting revealed the final piece of the puzzle. A former associate of the groom, long silent, stepped forward with irrefutable evidence, contracts, emails, and first-hand testimony that confirmed the bride's story and exposed the groom's manipulations. The room was thick with tension as she processed the validation of years of hidden truth. Relief mingled with lingering grief, but the sense of empowerment was undeniable. By the end of the week, the bride had transformed fully. She was no longer merely reacting to events. She was directing the narrative, guiding the outcome, and reclaiming control over her life. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she faced it with a clarity and courage that few could rival. The alliance she had forged with the billionaire and Victoria had shifted the balance of power irrevocably. The final stage of the journey began with preparation. The mansion, once a symbol of celebration turned chaos, now represented strategy, empowerment, and a future reclaimed. Every detail was scrutinized, every plan rehearsed, every potential outcome anticipated. The bride, standing at the center of it all, exuded confidence and calm, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had once defined her life. The day of public revelation arrived. The media, legal representatives, and key witnesses gathered in a private venue, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Cameras were discreetly positioned, microphones calibrated, and security meticulously arranged. Every element was designed to ensure that the truth emerged without distortion, manipulation, or obstruction. The bride began speaking, her voice steady, her words deliberate. She recounted her journey, not just the wedding drama, but the hidden manipulations, the betrayals, and the sacrifices. She named names carefully, presented evidence methodically, and allowed the story to unfold naturally, allowing listeners to feel the weight of the deception and the power of her resilience. The billionaire stood by her side, an anchor in a sea of scrutiny. His presence reinforced her credibility, providing support without overshadowing her narrative. Victoria monitored the proceedings, ready to intervene if necessary, ensuring that the truth remained intact and unassailable. Reactions varied: shock, disbelief, and awe rippled through the audience. Former allies of the groom found themselves exposed, their manipulations laid bare. The groom himself watched, helpless, as the story he had tried to control slipped beyond his grasp. Attempts to interrupt or challenge were systematically dismantled with evidence, testimony, and unwavering composure from the bride. By the end of the day, the narrative had shifted entirely. The bride had reclaimed her life, her story, and her dignity. Those who had doubted her courage were left in awe of her strength. The billionaire's support, combined with her intelligence and determination, had created a transformative moment, one that altered the course of her personal and public life forever. Even after the event concluded, the ripple effects continued. Invitations to speak, opportunities for advocacy, and offers of collaboration poured in. She realized that her experience, once a source of fear and frustration, had become a platform to inspire others, demonstrating the power of resilience, courage, and unwavering commitment to truth. In the quiet moments that followed, she reflected on the journey. The wedding, the betrayal, the public exposure, and the alliances formed. It all had led to this moment of clarity and empowerment. The billionaire, always present yet unobtrusive, shared a quiet smile with her, a silent acknowledgement of the path they had walked together. Her family, once entangled in secrecy, began to rebuild trust. Allies who had doubted were replaced by those who recognized her integrity and strength. The mansion, now a place of planning and empowerment, symbolized transformation, a reminder that even amidst chaos, clarity and control could be reclaimed. As night fell, she stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. She felt a sense of peace, tempered with the knowledge that life would continue to present challenges. But she also knew that the power to face those challenges lay firmly within her. The story that had once been written by others was now entirely her own, and she would continue to navigate it with courage, intelligence, and heart. The journey had been long, difficult, and often painful, but the bride had emerged stronger, wiser, and more empowered than ever. And as she turned to leave the room, the billionaire by her side, she realized a profound truth. Life's challenges were not meant to break her. They were meant to reveal the strength she had always possessed. In that moment, she smiled, knowing that the path ahead, though uncertain, would be walked with purpose, clarity, and the knowledge that she had finally reclaimed her destiny.